Hey everyone, hope you're doing real well today. Today I'm going to show you how to recode a variable in polars using Python using if-else logic. The data we're going to be using today is data from the U.S. Census Bureau of population estimates for each state. So I've used this in previous videos. It's a very easy data set to use, and we're only going to be focusing on states this time. So maybe the easiest place to start is to go over what we mean when we say if, else logic. And so we use if logic when we only want to keep the return value on the first condition that evaluates to true. So in other words, we have multiple conditions that we're testing, and we only want to keep the first one, and we don't want the rest of the conditions to evaluate. And then in these if blocks, we typically have a final else condition that returns a default value if all the other conditions evaluate to false. And so if you're familiar with Python coding and just the base library, this would be the format of how it would normally look. So let's say we have this variable that we created called var, and so we can test if var is equal to a, then set this var2 column equal to 1. And if this evaluates to true, since this is elif else logic or else if else logic, these wouldn't evaluate. We would only stop here. But if this evaluates to false, it would proceed on to the next elif condition and test if it's equal to b, and if it is, it would set it equal to 2. And then if that evaluates to false, it would proceed on to the else condition, which would give it the default value of 3. And so else is typically the default value of these variables we create using if logic. And so how do we replicate this logic with polars? This is kind of tricky in data science packages, pandas in particular. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a categorical column for population size of states using if logic. And namely, we're going to assign this new categorical variable a value of 1 if the population is less than 1 million, a value of 2 if it's less than 10 million, and a value of 3 if it's greater than 10 million. And this 3 value, that'll be the else condition. And so the problem we have is that if a state is small, we don't want the second logical test evaluating. So think about it. If a state has 500,000 people in it, condition 1 and condition 2 will both evaluate to true. So it'll be, if we use normal if logic, it'll end up with a value of 2, when in actuality we'd want it to end up with a value of 1. And so the way polars implements this is with a very intuitive function or method called polars.when. And so here's the basic format of it. PL, that's just my alias for polars in this program. And so we type in pl.when, and then we type in a series of when.then conditions. And so the first .when condition, that's going to correspond to your first if logical test. And so we write in .when, and then in parenthesis we put in our logical test. And if that evaluates to true, then it's going to go to the first .then condition and return a value to this new column that we're creating. And this new column that we're creating is specified or named in the alias method that we put at the very, very end. So if this evaluates to true, then these next two conditions are not going to be evaluated, or they're not going to return anything, I guess. And so if this evaluates to false, then it's going to go to the next when condition, and you can have as many when conditions as you want, and every single when condition you have after the first one is going to correspond to an else if condition. And so if the first one evaluates to false, then it's going to go to .when, and it's going to evaluate the next logical test. If it evaluates to true, it's going to go to that corresponding then condition and return that value. And so if both of these evaluate to false, then it's going to go to otherwise, and then in the otherwise method we put in the final return value we want. And otherwise corresponds to that final else statement, this default value that we want to set this column. And so here's how we would apply this format to this new categorical column that we want to create. And so this is just what it looks like. So we'll go through it step by step. So we're creating a new data set called states, which is going to be the same name as the input data frame we're sending to it. And we're going to say .with columns. And so the reason we use .with columns is because we want to create a data frame with all of the existing columns in it, in addition to the new ones we're going to create. And so we start out with pl.when, and we test if this column, and we point to a column by saying pl.call. and then the column name, is less than 1,000,000. And if this evaluates to true, then it's going to go to this then condition, and we're going to assign it the literal value of 1 colon less than 1,000,000. And the reason we have to use the lit method here is because quoted text in a lot of Polar's methods is parsed as column names. So if we just wrote in quoted text into this then condition, it would search for a column name called 1 colon less than 1,000,000. So we use .lit to tell Polars that we want to assign this cell or this column the value of a literal value rather than the value from another column. And so if this evaluates to true, then again it's going to skip over these other two conditions that we have here. But if it evaluates to false, if it has a value of say 5,000,000, then the second when condition is going to evaluate, and it's going to check to see if the population estimate is less than 10,000,000. If that's true, we'll assign it a value of 2, 1 to 10,000,000. Again, we use .lit. And then if both of these are false, then we go to the otherwise method where we assign it a value of greater than 10,000,000. And we're going to name this column pop size. And then we're just going to do a quick frequency count of this pop size column here and take a look at how many states are in each of these categories. And I'm not going to go over the formatting I did here. Polars has kind of a strange way of returning value counts data. I won't go over that. I'll show you how to count frequencies in a more readable way in a subsequent video I'm going to do. So we'll go ahead and run this. Go ahead and clear this. So the way you run this is you just type in Python. This is the way I run stuff. Then I'm calling this program if else if .py, and then just enter. Kind of spoiled the surprise for me there. Okay, but so here's our results. It's very simple. So we have three categories here, and we can see that 7 states have a population of less than 1,000,000. So they're small states. We have 34 states that have a population between 1 and 10 million, and we have 10 states that are very large, greater than 10 million. So that's how you create a new column using if-else-if logic using pl.when and Polars. It's very simple and very intuitive to do, which is one of the reasons I love Polar so much. It makes so much stuff very easy and very readable. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and hope you'll have a good rest of your day.